Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Brandon and Dave of PVD Horror. How you doing today, guys?
Well, good.
Doing
Can't complain, man. How you been?
good. Doing good.
Very, very glad to have you guys here. But before we talk about why you guys are here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You guys are Rhode Island's premier horror fan organization, founded in 2018. You guys host monthly movie nights, other live events all across New England. This isn't just in Rhode Island. And you're also a mainstay in the virtual horror community, running a YouTube channel and recently a podcast. So, what gave you guys the kick in the pants to actually go, you know what? We need to really start upping the horror game out here in the Northeast. What gave you guys the desire to start the podcast, the YouTube channel, and host all the things that you host?
I want to say, just being a fan of horror. I mean, for so many years, like myself and Dave, we actually found like our friendship started because of horror. We worked together, and so like just being friends and kind of communicating and kind of just talking, like listening to a pod. There was like one podcast back in the day that we were kind of like into, and then like just from sharing movies and then stuff like that and music. And it just came to the point where we're like, dude, we can do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just like something like, damn, let's get involved in this. And so it kind of like took off from there, and it's just been a great experience ever since.
Yeah. And I would say doing like the live event stuff, I don't think we really knew how many people would show up or if like there were even other horror fans the way we were. So
Hmm.
we started doing it. And it was like, it was always tied to like we are trying to raise money for like a charity or something, just to make it feel like it was worth it. And then we just started to see people showing up like each time and like the same people, and it was like, oh wow, people are like building friendships at this event because they also
Yeah.
kind of felt how we felt, where like they didn't know if other people liked horror. So it was cool, and it just kind of like built very organically. And yeah, that's been awesome. It's been
Yeah.
so great.
And that's the thing, like just the friendship of everybody. Like we're good friends with everybody that comes to our events. And like Dave said, like everything's been able to kind of like, keep going because a lot of people that have come have become authors or filmmakers, and all
Sure.
that has happened like during our events. And everybody, they always shout us out for just that, creating a space where they could sit there and go on and continue to do things that they dreamed of.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been
and
cool.
and that's amazing. And like you said,
Hmm.
building those friendships, building those relationships, it's something that's more important than a podcast, and
Yeah.
you guys have had conversations with actors, filmmakers, authors, other members of the horror community, focusing mostly on Indian underground horror films, because it's kind of our job as
Yeah.
podcasters, as YouTubers. We want to bring these underground films to light and try to show our audience these films that we appreciate that are a little more unheard of, so maybe they can gain a bigger audience. And not just that, before we talk a little bit more about that, you guys want to talk a little bit about the Black Apple?
Sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Dave, you want to go?
So the Black Apple is a comic book. It's an anthology comic book. The We recently linked up with Nowhere Comics and Wish I View, two local artists who had already kind of done Black Apple Volume One before we had linked up with them. And Brandon and I were just talking like, oh, it'd be awesome to have like a comic book, right? So, because we're always like throwing out ideas like that, we want to do this, want to do that. So we threw that out there. And then Jameson, who's Wish I View, was like, I think we could do this. And he really like kind of started to show us the ropes of what it looks like writing a story. And he linked up with a bunch of other illustrators and comic book artists to do this anthology comic. So Black Apple Comic Volume 2 is the first one that introduces our storyline, where Brandon and I are two like vampire hunters, kind of in the realm of like the Frog Brothers from Lost Boys. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
there's all this sprinkle of like Rhode Island folklore and old Rhode Island like spots that, so many people here grew up and loved. But I mean, you don't have to know those things in order to like really,
Sure.
get the story. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it happened. And it's been fun and like just a cool little side thing that like we spoke of, and it ended up kind of coming true, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And that always the best.
It,
Like
Yeah.
when you talk about this dream and then you can make it a reality.
yeah.
Do we have a release date?
It's actually out right now for like we
Oh,
have it at our events and everything like that. If people want to sit there and purchase a copy, you can DM us so we can ship out a copy to you. We have two different styles. We have a variant copy that pays homage to the old Tales from the Crypt comics. So it's
Mhm.
cool. And then we have another comic book cover that, one of a local artists had created. It's kind of also pays homage to Castle Freak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty
Nice.
cool. So it's pretty fun. So we want to thank everybody that supported this thing because we had a big Kickstarter, and like Dave said, just for the love of the community that we have, we raised over like 10 grand to sit there and create this shit. And so
Right.
it's like everybody supporting us. We wanted to say thank you for all the love from the horror community.
Yeah.
And that's super dope. And like they said, you can DM them. You don't have to go far looking for them, guys, because down in the description, I have all the links for their YouTube channel, their podcast, and their social media, because that way you guys can become a part of their family. And make sure you're following them on social media as well. So that way you can keep updates. Because, like they said, this is Black Apple Volume 2. Usually, when
Mhm.
there's volume, there's going to be more afterwards. So you can stay up to date on the things they have coming up in the future outside of the podcast and the YouTube channel. Make sure you're following them on social media. Make sure you're DMing them to get your copy of Black Apple today. So, man, in the huge fear of horror that you guys are working on, you're working on live shows, podcasts, YouTube channels, comic books. In order to do that, though, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now, gentlemen, I would like to go to the past and talk about what it was that got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And I'll start with you first this time, Dave. Your first horror movie was.
All right. So it was actually not really a film. It was like a collection of films. It was called Creepy Classics. And it was narrated by Vincent Price, and it had just various segments from classic horror films, sci-fi, all that. Um, it had so one of the clips it had, and this always stuck with me, was the graveyard scene from Night of the Living Dead. So it had, like, he's, we're coming to get you, Barbara. And I was little at the time, and I remember I used to like take it to my grandparents' house, and I would watch it with my grandmother, and she was super scared of everything. So I love that reaction. I found it ultimately really creepy. I would sleep over their house, and I actually live in their house now, which is actually funny because I would sleep in this room right here. And I was always so creeped out up here because I was like all alone on the top floor of their house. But after watching that, I just kind of, I hated and loved that feeling at the same time of being
Right.
that scared from something. But it turned into something that I just like couldn't shake, and like kind of started seeking out more and more. But Creepy Classics, I've been finding it a lot lately on VHS, when I go to
Mhm.
like thrift stores or things like that, or flea markets. So if you guys find a copy of it, I definitely urge you to grab it and check it out. It was something else. A lot of like Vincent Price clips from like those old adaptions that he did, like The Raven and things like that too are in there.
That's awesome. And like I said, when you have something that's narrated by Vincent Price, you know that it's going to be ear candy as well as eye candy. So
Yes,
I,
yes.
I can only imagine how amazing that was to start with that. So we're going to go a little bit darker now. Brandon, your first horror movie was.
Waxwork. Yeah, 1988 film, Waxwork. Yeah, it's a great film, and kind of going back, like me and Dave actually just talked about this the other day, about how, the younger kids coming up into horror, how they have to look at things like, imaginary, saying, "Oh, that was probably my first horror movie." But like just being able to be like, my age right now and say, "Hey, Waxworks is my first film that I watched when I was younger." So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, and we grew up in a golden era of horror, in my opinion. And,
Mhm.
I can honestly see why in 20, 30 years they'll be talking about, James Wan and, Mike Flanagan,
Yeah.
talking about them like they were the Wes Craven, John Carpenter of this time.
Yep.
But it's just amazing to watch how horror goes in cycles, and see how these things that were relevant back then can still be relevant now. And I can honestly say this, guys, from the bottom of my heart, this is the first time in over 525 episodes I've
Hmm.
talked about either one of these. So
Okay.
I'm really, really stoked to dig into
That's
this.
cool.
So,
That's cool.
Dave, we know you were young watching it
Yeah.
at your grandma's house for the first time with
Yeah.
Creepy Classics, but Brandon, with Waxwork, do you remember who you were with the first time that you had seen it?
So I always talk about this. This is I was introduced to horror from my grandmother. So that was our relationship. So I would always watch so many crazy films with her, from like Basket Case and everything like that. But there was just like one thing. It was just like Waxwork, the cover art, going to the movie store, just seeing that case like on the, and right sitting inside the video store. I'm just like, man, this movie always just did something. I'm just like, I want to watch that. And I remember we had rented it, and then we watched it, and just watching that film, it, like, even going back to watching it now, how that film just takes you to so many different places from just one storyline. Like, you have the kids entering the waxworks, and how each little like setup of in the waxworks takes them into a whole new world. And so like I remember that shit just standing out to me, like, wow, like that hit me, like for film, for horror, for everything. And it just like it places a big part of my love for horror today.
And it's funny because I was blessed. I grew up in
Mm,
a video store. My mom and dad owned a mom and pop video store called Downtown Video, and
Nice.
I was super lucky. I don't take that for granted, but I've talked about this with other people, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. So for people listening that have heard this before, I'm sorry, but our YouTube was walking up and down the aisles looking at
yeah.
the covers. We couldn't just go look at trailers whenever we wanted. So
Yes.
YouTube
Hmm.
for us was just walking up and down, looking at every single cover, trying to see like which one is it. And for me, it was House, 1986.
Yeah.
Ding
Yep.
Dong, You're Dead.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was my first.
Okay.
So I definitely understand where you're coming from, and that was one as a kid that I seen it maybe because H was right at face level.
Hmm.
But seeing that finger hitting the doorbell, I was just like, I have to watch this. I thought it was about a killer hand. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
kid, I was like, oh, there's a killer hand in this movie. But then I watched it, and it's still my favorite horror movie to this day. So we talked a little bit about it, Dave, a little bit ago with Creepy Classics and the Night of the Living Dead scene. But of all the segments, was that the one that affected you the most in Creepy Classics? I mean, you already talked about the iconic.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Yeah, I think that scene really got me. And it's funny because like even they do show glimpses of like the actual zombies, but it was actually that cemetery scene that I found to be like the creepiest thing that like really, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just watching the way he was teasing her and like how terrified she looked, that like kind of stuck out to me. Um and yeah, I think I was a little bit of a wuss too. So like all that was like yeah, I mean, the apple doesn't fall far from my tree. My grandmother was watching everything like this. So yeah, it just like that whole thing got to me. And this you know what else got to me from like the whole film itself? It was like the Vincent Price when he's narrating, he's also in like these like gothic, there's like candles lit. It's like he's in like the Haunted Mansion at Disney or something like that. And I love that, and I still love that to this day. Like Haunted Mansion's my favorite ride. Like I love stuff like that. It was just the whole feel. It made me feel something that I really liked and wanted to like continue to watch. And then that was always a thing, was like watching old scary movies with my grandparents, and then when I go home I'd be watching a little bit more modern horror, whatever I could get access to that was on like Nightmare on Elm Street 5 on USA, like watching it with commercials but like on repeat as many times as I could. On a sick day was like a day I'll never forget, because I think that was like embedded my love for Freddy that day when I watched him be born. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that kind of led up to that love for horror, which I'm sure most people have, like those little moments of a clip from this and a clip from that. But that kind of also fits in the realm of that creepy classics, because it's just various clips that come together that kind of like piece together my love for the genre.
Like a Vincent Price led Faces of Death, man.
Yeah, I love Faces for Death too. When I was in high school, that was like my way. That was like the only thing I could get my friends to watch that was horror, because none of them really liked horror. So I was like, hey, let's
Right.
watch Faces of Death. This is crazy. And I think I was like smiling as they're like, oh my God.
It's brutal, man.
Yeah.
I always remember the little old lady getting hit by the train. Like that's one that I'll always remember. Like, God damn, it was crazy. It's so funny. You go back and watch it now, because I remember like Night of the Living Dead was a very important movie to me as a kid too. And you go back and you watch that part now when Johnny dies on the headstone. You're like, wait, that killed that guy? Like that, you know what I mean? Like that's what it looks way better in the remake, obviously, when you have the bounce and everything. But when you see Johnny's death, you're like, huh, I was expecting it. That look quite anticlimactic now that I'm older. So
it's very, the whole
Waxwork
scene is very
really
dramatic too. Just like Judith O'Day is like just very dramatic. It's just like, yeah, the whole thing's very dramatic.
It's actually funny too, because my grandmother's name's Barbara. So I remember when I was a little kid, I'm like, they're coming to get you, Barbara.
She was like, yeah, you're going to your room. You're grounded. So Waxwork is a movie that not a lot of people talk about. This is a movie that, like you said, it made a huge impression. And it actually has some pretty good practical effects with the werewolves and stuff. But we know which scene affected Dave the most. But what would you say the kill that stuck out to you the most from Waxwork would be?
Definitely the werewolf scene, because just going into that whole scene, I think that's like 20 minutes into the film, you know. So you start the film off with the kids in school, just doing a regular normal day like life, like getting up, getting ready for school, going to school, hanging out with each other at the football field, and then just going to hang out like at nighttime. And then so it's like they go somewhere that then, like, you know, they were invited to the Waxworks. And then so when they actually start to go around and look around in there, and they just get, the kid gets transformed into that time where the werewolf was, man, that was just like different, you know what I mean? And so just going through
Yeah.
that whole setup and then just seeing, you know, the werewolf rip that guy apart, I was just
Right in
like,
half,
I'm
almost
like,
half.
what the fuck? And I'm like, what am I watching? You know,
Yeah.
so that definitely played a big part on everything from me, you know, going forward from there.
Right. And nowadays, remakes, requels,
Hmm.
sequels, kind of all the rage now in Hollywood. But is Waxwork a movie you would like to see them attempt to remake today, or is that something you think they should kind of just leave alone?
Me and Dave, we always talk about this remakes. I think they have to have the right person to like recreate something like that.
Yeah.
If not, if you have to have like the love and passion, and waxwork has to play like a big role in your life to be attached to something like that. Because even the sequel, you know, they did a sequel and it was like totally different, you know, and they go back in time, and so it's like you just have so many different things. But I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know if I want to see that remade, you know what I mean? Because it just plays a big part in my life. I don't think that, especially with today, like some of these films aren't being done well, you know, so I wouldn't want to see it remade. I don't want
Yeah.
to drag that out. But yeah,
I,
no.
I think I think I agree with you. If they were doing it for a cash grab, no
Yeah,
thanks. But if you got the right people attached to it, they're going to keep it practical.
yeah,
There's nothing worse to me than a CGI whoop transformation. That's terrible. So,
exactly.
um,
Yeah.
we've talked about your guys' first horror movies, and Dave, when we talk about creepy classics, you talked about the amount of times you watched this as a kid and the Night of the Living Dead scene that affected you. But was there any other sequences throughout the film that was maybe your favorite a little more than that? Not just that scared you, but maybe that you paid attention to a little bit more?
Yeah, like I was saying, like the Poe adaptations, and it's funny because like I now that I never really like connected a lot of this, but I love Poe, and I love literature. So those adaptations, like there's one where they do the Raven. There's a couple others that I can't, that I'm like escaping me now. But that was a big one, and it was like in like it was like a gothic castle. So I love that. And there was a scene from the Fly as well, I believe, in there. Um, there was a ton of things. It was just like, but the like I said, the one that stuck out to me the most was definitely Night of the Living Dead and the Raven. Those were the two that like stuck out to me. Um, but then Vincent Price was also like he was huge at the time too. So just like anything that he did was always like something that I loved. That was probably close to around when Thriller came out. So he was like
Hmm.
for people our age, it was like, he was huge because of that Thriller
Yeah.
um video. So I think it was just just anything that he did, I was like, all right, that I want to see more and more of that.
Right, right. Well, I mean, and like you said, when you think about Vincent Price with the Raven and stuff like that, like that's such when they did the Raven, the new film, and I heard that they were doing John Cusack, I was like, he is somebody that I think could do this justice. And while the film wasn't great, Cusack did a great job, but nobody could do what Vincent Price is able to do.
Yeah.
That's trying to fill shoes that are impossible to fill. So,
Mhm.
just to go back and watch this, I'm going to try to find this VHS because this sounds absolutely. I've never seen this, so I,
Uh-huh.
I got to try to find a way to check it out. So, we've talked about your guys' first horror movies and what they mean to you. But here for a second, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. Brandon, you're going to get to cheat for a second. Dave, I'm going to ask you first.
Okay.
My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Dave? What is your favorite horror movie of
Oh
all
boy.
time?
Oh boy. Uh so and like this changes, I feel like.
Yeah,
So and it forever I would have said Nightmare on Elm Street 3. That has always been like one that would just right off the top of my head, like easy go. More recently, my love for Brain Scan has kind of like resurged. That was the first rated R film I saw in theaters. It was, my sister snuck me in. I was like super excited, and I love that movie. Like I'm, the more as much as I wanted to say I was an 80s kid. I think I did most of my maturing in the 90s, and that's a very 90s film, and it like really reminds me of a time that I'm, you know, like when video games are really like we thought we were going to be in a virtual world. And that like the more I think about that, the more I'm like, that was a kind of a crazy time. I really do like stuff from that. So like right now, I probably would say Brain Scan's one of my favorite films. But Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I just always love that. I'm a huge Freddy fan. And just the idea of like everything just connects back, because then like Brandon and I both work with individuals who have like mental health issues and disabilities. Like that's our like day jobs. And I'm like, and then the theme in that is they're all in like, you know, the psychiatric hospital. So I'm like, I don't know. It's weird how everything starts to connect. But so that would probably be my answer. But Brain Scan's really close there. That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, those are two great
You're
movies
going
to
for 20
choose
minutes
from.
and we can't do that, I guess.
So, okay, I'll let you ask. Give me a second. All right, he's getting a little impatient here. So now it's your turn, Brandon. What's
All
your
right.
favorite scary movie, Brandon?
All
What
right.
is your favorite horror movie of all time?
I have to, like Dave said, it's a hard thing because it always changes up. But for me, it always sticks to The Lost Boys, because that was a film that I would always just throw on, and it would just take me to like a whole nother world. You know what I mean? Just like it was always fun. Like you see these kids and they become vampires. Everything just seems so cool, you know what I mean? And like amusement parks and just like a good time. It just always just like stuck out to me. Like whenever I like something was going on, like that would be a film that just like transformed like my whole like thing to a positive like outlook on things. So that definitely just stuck out to me, and I still have love for it now. Like even like we did a big showing, like an event for it, and we had so many people come out. We have like three beers, like you know what I mean, with our the local brewery that we do, and we have like a cool Lost Boys beer, and it has us hanging from like a broken bridge that's in our local like state. So it's like it's
Yeah,
cool, you know.
yeah.
That's awesome, man. So we've talked about your guys' first horror movie, your favorite horror movie. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. And I'm gonna start with you first this time, Brendan. We're
Yep.
gonna go back to sorry, we're gonna go back to Waxwork, and what we're gonna do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. All we're
Mm.
doing here, sir, is ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle.
Mhm.
Brandon, what would your ranking of Waxwork be?
I have to give that 5 skulls all the way, man. You know, that messed me up.
I figured, but you never want to assume. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So, how about you, Dave? 0 to 5 skulls for creepy classics. What would your ranking of that
I'm
be?
gonna say it's a 4.5.
Mhm.
I think there was a few things later that really solidified my love for the genre. It Sounds of the Lambs, Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Mhm.
But that was definitely like laid some of the groundwork for me to like start liking things that made me feel scared or uncomfortable.
Sure. Well, and I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, I want to remind you we have all their social media links, as well as the YouTube page and the podcast down in the description. So make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you are giving them 5 stars and letting them know why they're so fucking great. And make sure you're following them on social media so you can stay up to date on all the amazing things they have in the future. Gentlemen, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.